Books teach us, they inspire us, they challenge us, and they expand our horizons. Books contain the best thoughts of the greatest minds in history, but the problem is, there are millions to choose from. So what should you invest your time reading? What should you spend your money on? How do you sort through all the bullshit and find the good shit? You let the superior men do the work. Matt and Jay take the best books, pick the most important points, and distill them down to a concentrated 30-minute podcast. We help you find the books you need to read and why you need to read them. You may even learn something. So take out your coffee, tea, a glass of wine, or a good IPA. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome to the Superior Men Bookcast. And welcome to the Superior Men Bookcast. Today's book is going to be 48 Laws of Power. It's the book we're going through here by Robert Greene. Greene with an E, so Greene E. Published in 2000. So this book's been out for just about 20 years. Pretty cool. So let's dive right into 48 Laws of Power. It's a huge book, lots of stuff. We're just going to give you a good overview of the book here for this. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about here?
Like so many of the books that we love to discuss here, it's one of those books that there's no possible way that we can cover it in 30 minutes, but you know what? We're going to do it anyway.
Exactly.
Our goal here, we want to talk, let's first briefly describe what's going on in this overall theme. This is, as the title implies, it's about power, how to get it, how to hold on to it, how not to lose it, and then, you know, what happens if you don't do it, like just all of the intricacies of power. And there's 48 different little tenets of it, and each one of them super powerful.
And what's really interesting about this too is really it's whether or not you agree with this, where you're at on your moral compass with any of these laws, period. It's just, this is what it is, period. This is how power is achieved, acquired, sustained through this. And what I love about this is that he gives, he goes through 48 separate laws. We're not going to read through like law number 1. We're not going to do that. But basically, he goes through the historical examples for each of the 48 laws, which is really cool, and gives like a good use of it when somebody like adhered to or obeyed whatever that law was, and then some, maybe several of them, and then also examples of when they did not adhere to whatever that law is. So, you know, we're really setting out here without a moral compass, what has happened, and using historical examples to illustrate each one of those points.
And I think that's really the power of the book more than anything else, because a lot of people have perspectives on how to get power, how to maintain it, how to use it and wield it effectively. But he goes back through history, going back all the way to we're talking 1,000 years, 2,000 years BC, and in China, and telling stories all the way through till present. Each one of the laws is exemplified by a different actual event. So what Greene sets out to do, his purpose is to describe in detail, without a moral bias, how these various figures use to gain power. The challenge and problems that this book attempts to solve, it's really how to gain influence over other people. That is the purpose of this book, and it is what most people purchase it for and read it for, although there are other reasons, and we'll discuss those in a minute here. The intended audience of the book, Matt, who would you say it's for?
So really, you just need to be diving into this book. You want to learn how power works, how to get it, who has it, why they have it, what they're doing with it, all of that. So it's just the study of power in a moral bubble. So not dealing with morality at all, where a lot of times your stories of power deal with morality as well. This does not, which is an interesting read for this on here. So let's talk about this. So the book, it's a very, very easy to read. It has some really cool stories. You can read it in chunks. You can take this book that's 450 pages and you can divvy it up into 48 separate sections if you want to, and go into it. It's probably about 15 hours or so to read. And the audio is just over 23 hours. There's also an abridged version of the audiobook as well that's just under 10 if you really don't have time, but I'd go for the whole thing if I were you guys on this one. So as far as the book, how well known is this book here, Jay?
Under the subject, it is really well known. We got closing in on 3,000 reviews on Amazon. As we were discussing earlier, Matt, in the Audible reviews, it's closer to 5,000. I think exactly, and actually, 2,000.
And let me just interrupt you here real quick. It's actually just shy of 5,000 for the abridged. It's over 10,000 4.5-star reviews for the audiobook, for the full version. 10,000 reviews.
Wow.
Yeah, the unabridged.
Yeah, no, it is a significant piece of work in its category. On Audible, of all of the audiobooks, it is number 74. So that's out of every book in every single category. Number 1 in biographies of historical and political figures. Number 1 in political history and theory. Does that mean that it is that valuable?
Yes.
Apparently, a lot of people think so. A lot of people believe so.
I totally believe so. I think this is one that it's absolutely huge. And I just want to jump in here real quick about where I heard about this book. For those of you who read our website, wearesuperiormen.com, I actually talk about, there's several articles. We talk about the red pill, and we talk about here on our podcast, Superior Men Podcast. But I saw it on the sidebar as in on the red pill subreddit. Where it said, sort of required reading. And that's where I jumped into this book, and I was like, interesting. I've never really heard of this. And it just kind of coincided with me when I had a long commute, when I had changed jobs and I was driving 2.5 hours one way to work for about a month until I moved. I had 5 hours a day. So I got through this book really quick, like in a week. And I actually ended up listening to it twice, just because of how powerful it was.
Oh, wow. That's, I don't know what's more impressive, the fact that you dug into this book twice, or that you had a 5-hour commute every day. Like, jeez.
Both.
Jeez. I got into it a little bit differently, but where I hear a lot of people picking it up from is from red pill community, from kind of that dating perspective of like what's actually going on with male and female relationships, and the power dynamic between men and women, and whether or not you want to talk about it. Especially if you talk to most women, you ask them about that, that's a whole nother subject. But right. the power dynamic is a big deal in every human interaction. I actually got introduced to 48 Laws through you, Matt. You're the one that kind of was the first person to open my eyes to it. And as I went through and I did the audiobook as well for the first time, listened to it, there were a couple of times I had to turn it off because it was offensive to me that people were using these things, and really that this was something that existed in the first place, because it is not easy to swallow a lot of it, but at the same time, it's kind of a description. It's like a human show, one of those shows about animals attacking each other. Is it pretty that lions are shredding water buffalo, and feeding them to their kids? It's not necessarily attractive. Is it what happens every single day? Absolutely. Right. So let's go from here into a little bit of background on Robert Greene. This guy grew up in Los Angeles, attended UC Berkeley and finished in University of Wisconsin with a degree in classical studies. And I was an English major in school. And what classical studies basically means is you studied a whole bunch of random crap and you still needed a major to graduate with. So that's kind of the catch-all under liberal arts and English and history and stuff. They kind of cobble something together. And you kind of get the sense that this guy is interested in a lot of different things. Turns out he's had, at least in his words, about 80 jobs before becoming an author, including construction worker, translator, magazine editor, and then a Hollywood movie writer.
That's awesome.
And all of those different ways of looking at the world and interacting with the world. You know, I'm Matt, you and I have talked about this for sure. That's the kind of thing that makes people more interesting. You want to spend time talking with somebody who has a lot of different backgrounds rather than just a writer. That's all they do is write all the time. They don't actually know what the real world looks like.
Well, yeah, an academic has a way of not understanding the world sometimes, not understanding how it really is. They understand what they think it is. So, yeah.
The theory, it's theory versus practice, and that was where where Greene originally kind of got the ideas for doing 48 Laws, working in Hollywood. Which, if you've ever had a chance to work with Hollywood and kind of like tapped into that a little bit, it is probably one of the most ruthless industries in the world, maybe the most ruthless. So getting into a little bit of that ruthlessness, he's been endorsed by rap artists. He's kind of like the number one guy for rap. Jay-Z, Kanye West, Busta Rhymes, Ludacris, Drake, bunch of other people have openly endorsed Greene's 48 Laws of Power. Actual songs by Jay-Z, Kanye, Busta Rhymes about it. He actually wrote the book, The 50th Law, with rapper 50 Cent, which is super interesting. And I haven't read that. Have you read 50th Law, Matt?
No, I haven't. I have not read that one.
Okay. Yeah, that's on my list. He's also written several other books, including Art of Seduction, came out in 2001, 33 Strategies of War in 2006, 50th Law, September 2009, and then Mastery, which is one that I've heard about multiple times from different places. And then Laws of Human Nature came out last year.
And I have both Mastery and the Laws of Human Nature. I've read Mastery. I have Laws of Human Nature on my to-do list, so that's a good one too.
Excellent. Well, then you're perfect here for kind of introing to the table of contents. Let's talk a little bit, really super briefly, about some of the themes and what we got going on in here.
All right. So really, what this is, we're talking. So it really is condensing each one of these 48 laws of power. So achieving, maintaining, understanding how power works. So it's looking at how that happens, how that works, and that's really what this book is all about. And it listed again, law number 1. No, I'm not going to read. I told you I'm not going to read all of them because it's ridiculous. But just examples of learn to keep people dependent on you, conceal your attentions, crush your enemy totally. Those are different laws, and then outlines through each one of them. And a lot of times, again, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at how power works in an amoral setting. There is no morality attached to this, because I look at this and what was powerful for me is there were some, and I didn't turn it off like you did, Jay, but when I was doing it, I was like, wow, I disagree with that. As far as like, I would never do that. However, just because you would never do that does not mean that somebody else wouldn't do that. So, really the preface is really important. A lot of times for books, I don't know. I wouldn't say I don't read it, but a lot of times I'm just sort of like, yeah, chapter 1. That's what I get into. This is one where the preface is very important, and he does talk about why this is important, and how to sort of look at it if you're going to look at things through a moral perspective. That something for you to give some thought to.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much to think about, And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I, on multiple occasions, had to turn it off just because my brain was done. Like, I'm like, I don't want to have to think this much, because it really is kind of like looking at the language of human interactions in terms of how do people accomplish things? How do people influence circumstances and their environment around them? How do they make things happen? And a lot of times you have no idea, at least I certainly didn't going into this book, how much is actually going on under the scenes and behind the scenes. But if you see this stuff, it's like, oh, that's actually going on. I know that person. I know a person that's doing that right now. I know those people are being influenced by this. So it's fascinating and scary, but really interesting.
So give me, what did you like best about the book?
I would say that would probably be the number one thing that I liked about the book, is that it showed me kind of like pulled the screen away, pulled the kind of like the trappings away from the surface. I can see the wizard at work back behind, and that is I always enjoy having that experience. This is probably one of the most uncomfortable, maybe the most uncomfortable experience that I've ever had in a book in that way, where it's like, is this really all happening? But the more you look at it, the more you got to go. Many cases, yes.
Right. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Give me a quote or two, whatever you got. What do you got for this book?
Probably my favorite quote in this one is maybe the most optimistic and most moral, and which is where I try and lead. My favorite Marvel superhero is Captain America, because he does the right thing. He always does the right thing, even if it's hard. So this is the one that probably resonated most with me, is Law 28. Interaction with boldness. If you are unsure of a course of action, do not attempt it. Your doubts and hesitations will infect your execution. Timidity is dangerous. Better to enter with boldness. Any mistakes you commit through audacity are easily corrected with more audacity. Everyone admires the bold. No one honors the timid.
Yep. Fantastic. I love that.
It's about living as big, 100% in, give everything. If you're going to commit to it, do it. And I have yet to see that be incorrect in any area of life.
Yeah, well, and I know you said this book was very uncomfortable to read at times. So, like, what did you take away? Was some of that uncomfortableness, were you able to take away some stuff from that?
Yes, actually, I have definitely internalized a number of these things. And even going back through, this is one of the reasons why we're excited about being able to do this. We're actually doing it for both the Bookcast and a podcast, or episode 24 podcast on this as well. So make sure to check that one out also in addition to this. But the opportunity to dig back into this, it's the kind of book that you never want to read just once, because there's so many things that are at play in your own life. And as you really dig in and look at each one of those laws, you'll realize people are manipulating you. You'll realize that people are manipulating other people. In your workplace, you're going to be seeing it. In your relationships with your family, your next door neighbors, everything that you see in government, 100% of what's happening in government, this is all happening. And the more you learn these laws and the more you understand how they work and how people are using them, then you can start to understand when you're being manipulated, or you can start to potentially use some of that stuff. I personally would not want to use some of these things, but other people will. And whether or not you are using it, it's 100% for sure someone is using it on you. So if you don't know it, you won't be able to defend yourself against it. So that's really changed.
It's totally true. That's very true. It's just even understanding it. So that's good. So, okay. So other than being uncomfortable, other than sort of challenging some of your moral compass, what did you like the least of this book?
I think the thing that is the most challenging for me, and the one that I would say is at multiple times too much, is that he writes the book from the perspective that this is what you need to do, whatever the law is. So if it's a law that says pose as a friend, work as a spy, He writes it in such a way that these are the things that you must do. Or if you're never going to commit to anybody, which law 20, do not commit to anyone. Well, that's not a great way to be a friend or a husband or a father. If you never commit to your kids, if you never commit to somebody else. And the description of the law is make sure you never commit to anybody. He describes it in this is what you must do. So if you are not paying close attention and you don't kind of have a decent sense of morality prior to going into this book, you could be swayed because there is no kind of footnote that says, we just want to let you know this is not the ideal way to behave. There's a better way to do it. That kind of thing. He's just like, nope, this is how to do it, period. So I think that is a little bit challenging. And if I had the chance to talk to him, I would like to know why he did that. Why did he do it so kind of like pro-positive for each one of those laws?
Yep.
And it's a little bit difficult.
Yeah, no, and that totally does make sense. What about, just real quick here at the end, what about anything else that's connected to this that you have read that sort of reminds you of this book, or that's sort of tangentially connected to this book?
Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Read the Game of Thrones novels. The show's real good, but the Game of Thrones novels just really dig into that. I would say do that. I'm also really excited to read Mastery for Greene's perspective, as well as Art of Seduction, which is, as I understand it, are expansions of those things. So it's really interesting. And then also I would read the news. That would be the next thing to read as well, to watch this stuff in play. Matt, let's turn the tables. Let's give you a chance to answer some of these questions. What about you? What did you like best about this book?
What I liked about this is that it sort of pulls the curtain back, gives you a raw look at what power is, the people who are seeking power and how they do it, what they're doing it for. Well, maybe not what they're doing it for, but what those moves are, whether you are conscious or unconscious of it. It's you get to see how it works, how power and the attainment of power. And I know the other thing is too, is that power's on many levels. You can have power in your workplace. You can have power not just being a king or whatever, but it's power, on a very small level too. So it talks about things on a very big and very grand scale and very small scale. So I think that's what I like the most about it.
It's so amazing. It's like learning how to play chess almost,
Right.
It's if you don't know that each one of those players has different capacities, like your knight can do this and the rook can do this and stuff like that, you can't accomplish very much. And then this one just gives you instructions kind of like on how each one of those things work. How about a quote or two?
And I said this, I like looking at the preface, especially for this particular book. So mine comes from there. And the quote is, half of your mastery of power comes from what you do not do, what you do not allow yourself to get dragged into. For this skill, you must learn to judge all things by what they cost you. As Nietzsche wrote, the value of a thing sometimes lies not in what one attains with it, but in what one pays for it, what it costs us. Perhaps you will attain your goal, and a worthy goal at that, but at what price? Apply this standard to everything, including whether to collaborate with other people or to come to their aid. I love that. I just really love that quote, because I think a lot of times too we view power as an action. What I do, what I don't do, or so what I do and how I'm attaining it that way. But what this is saying is there's a lot of power in inaction with certain things too. And I'm sure we can all relate to those coworkers that they're just a black hole and they'll drag us down. And some of those are just like, you know what, I can't help you, and I can't help you on this. and there's some power in that too, which I thought was interesting.
That's super powerful. What does something cost you? Yeah.
Yep.
What do you say? So obviously talking about a couple of things that you learned from this book. What about you, kind of overall? Would you say the most important thing, how it changed you, and kind of like what you've absorbed from this?
So, like I said,
Before and after.
when I first started reading this, I was starting a new job, and I think it just got me thinking. And I think we all need to, especially in a new environment, especially a new career or whatever, you have to think, what's going on? Like, what am I seeing? What's happening? Where's the power? Where are the struggles? Where's the power play in this particular thing? So that was a big one for me, where it sort of got me to sit back and observe, and just see kind of what was going on. That I think did it for me.
There's so much to do. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying there, man. What did you like least?
There's not much, because really there's not. I wasn't turned off by the immoral actions of some of this stuff, just because it wasn't that. I understand, and being around in law enforcement, I understand people do some really, really horrible things, and I'm kind of a little bit desensitized to that, unfortunately. And so that didn't bother me. It was just sort of putting almost not a guide, but putting it into words as far as what that was. So that didn't bother me as much, but I don't know. It's really hard for me to come up with a negative on this particular one. So I don't know. I'd have a hard time with that one.
Okay. So, well, obviously a big fan of the book. That's great. If you had a chance to sit down with Greene, what would you ask him?
So I love history. I love studying history, and I like process. So my questions would be looking at his process. What did he find? How did he come up and find these stories? What was his thing like? So that's really it for me. And that's what I would come up. That's what I would want to know.
You're like dig into his kind of like how he got to where he was, and his thinking.
Yeah, I like it.
Gotcha. Oh man, he would be amazing to sit down with. Can you imagine getting him in the booth? Oh,
I know, right?
That would be fantastic. That would be fantastic. Any other books you might recommend along this subject, connected, related?
No, just the ones that you covered, because really the Song of Fire and Ice, that whole series, the mastery is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to reading some more of Robert Greene's books.
Great. Well, this is an excellent book. It really is, and should be required reading in school, should be required reading at pretty much any new job. And we're going to be digging into it a little bit more in episode 24 of the podcast. We're going to be talking about those two things, 48 Laws of Power and Game of Thrones. So make sure to check out Superior Men Podcast episode 24 on that subject. Matt, any last minute thoughts here before we go?
Nope. Enjoy the book. Sit here with an open mind. I've probably listened to this book 4 or 5 times, and I've read it through probably twice. This is something where even if you're like me, you like to listen to the book, this is something where you will also want to purchase a book so that you can actually, read it in whatever form you would like. There's a lot of good information in this book. And this is a multiple read just to understand what's going on.
It's an amazing book. You guys need to pick it up. 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next time.
A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. The man who never reads lives only one. Thank you for listening to the Superior Men Bookcast. Share it with a friend. You heard our thoughts. Go read it for yourself.